Hello, everyone. I'm Randy Martin. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Bureau of Land Management virtual public meeting for the Esmeralda 7 Resource Management Plan Amendment Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement. We're going to give everyone a few minutes here to join the meeting, and then we'll begin the PowerPoint presentation. So please stay tuned. I do want to note that closed captioning is available by selecting the closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you are using the Zoom web portal or Zoom app on your computer. Again, welcome everyone to today's meeting for the Esmeralda 7 Resource Management Plan Amendment Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement. My name is Randy Martin, and I am a Public Affairs Specialist with the Bureau of Land Management, and I'm going to be one of your meeting facilitators today. We also have Megan Stone with AECOM, who will be helping facilitate the question and answer and public comment session of today's meeting. Next slide. Before we get into today's presentation, I'm going to review the meeting ground rules and some tips and tricks for using Zoom today. We will then get started with some introductions and the BLM's presentation. After the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session, followed by verbal comment session. Next slide. For the duration of the meeting, participant videos will be turned off. Microphones will also remain off until we reach the question and answer and comment session, at which point you will be allowed to unmute if you choose to provide verbal comment. Written questions for the BLM about the project can be sent through the question and answer box located on your Zoom toolbar. You could submit written questions at any time throughout the meeting. However, the Bureau of Land Management will only begin providing answers once we reach the question and answer session. Before starting the question and answer session, we will review these instructions again. During our comment session, verbal comments will be limited to 2 minutes to provide everyone an opportunity to provide comment today. And lastly, we do ask that you avoid using inappropriate language and respect all participants and viewpoints for the duration of this meeting. During the meeting, if you need technical assistance, you can enter your message in the chat box and a technician from our team will contact you, or you can send an email to, and I'll read this by letter, megan.stone@aecom.com. That's MEGAN dot STONE @AECOM dot COM. Next slide. All of the features that we will be using today are on the screen now. These are all available on your Zoom toolbar, which is at the bottom of your screen. And you may need to toggle your mouse or press on your phone screen for it to pop up. The Q&A box will be used for any questions directed to the Bureau of Land Management about the project. The chat box will be used for any technical Zoom-related questions you may have. We will also be placing relevant website links, emails, and mailing addresses in the chat box throughout the meeting. Lastly, the raise hand feature will be used during the question and answer session if you would like to ask a verbal question. We will review all of these instructions again prior to using them during the question and answer session. And with that, I would like to introduce Scott Distel with the Bureau of Land Management. Scott?
Yes, thank you, Randy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Distel, and I'm serving as the BLM's NEPA project manager for this effort. Also with the BLM, we have on today's meeting David Dick, the program manager for the Renewable Energy Coordination Office for the BLM's Battle Mountain District. Also in attendance, we are joined by the NEPA Consultant Group, AECOM, and representatives of the project applicants. Today's meeting is being recorded and will be available with a copy of this presentation for public viewing on the project's e-planning website within 10 business days. Slide. We are here today to discuss the Esmeralda 7 Draft Resource Management Plan Amendment and Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement. A notice of availability was published in the Federal Register on July 26th, which began the 90-day public review and comment period. To best inform the preparation of the final Resource Management Plan Amendment and Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, please be sure to submit any written comments by October 24th. You may use the electronic comment form on the BLM's National NEPA Register at https://eplanning.blm.gov/e-planning-ui//project/2020804530. And I will repeat that by the letter here. Again, that's https://project/2020804530. Comments may also be submitted by email to blm_nv_bmdo_pnec_nepa@blm.gov. Again, that's BLM_NEPA@blm.gov, or comments may be mailed or hand delivered to the BLM Battle Mountain District Office, attention Esmeralda 7 Project at 50 Bastion Road, that's 50 BASTIAN Road, Battle Mountain, Nevada 89820. Next slide. For some background on this project, the BLM's Battle Mountain District Office's Tonopah Field Office received applications for 7 right-of-way grants to construct, operate, maintain, and decommission utility-scale photovoltaic facilities with battery energy storage in Esmeralda County, Nevada. The 7 proposed facilities would be geographically contiguous and encompass around 62,000 acres. The facilities would also be adjacent to the proposed corridor for NV Energy's GreenLink West transmission project. The BLM is preparing this programmatic level EIS that analyzes amending the Tonopah Resource Management Plan for visual and slope management direction. This programmatic level EIS would not approve any individual right-of-way grant, and further site-specific NEPA analysis for each individual project would be necessary after a record of decision is issued for this programmatic review. Next slide. On your screen is a figure of the planning area. The proposed projects are located off of US Highway 95 and State Route 265, about 30 miles west of Tonopah, Nevada. The 7 proposed projects include Lone Mountain Solar, Esmeralda Energy Center, Smoky Valley Solar, Gold Dust Solar, Nivlock Solar, Red Ridge 1 Solar, and Red Ridge 2 Solar. The solid line extending from the northwest to the southeast on this figure shows the location of the Greenlink West transmission project as proposed in the final EIS for that project. The Esmeralda 7 projects are proposed entirely on BLM administered public lands, and there are some nearby private parcels located outside of the proposed project areas. Next slide. The BLM's purpose for this federal action is to amend the visual and slope management direction in the Tonopah Resource Management Plan in compliance with the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. The need for this action is to fulfill the BLM's responsibilities under the BLM's right-of-way regulations and the Federal Land Policy and Management Act mandate to manage public lands for multiple uses, including the generation and transmission of electrical energy, and to consider the long-term needs of current and future generations for renewable and non-renewable resources within the planning area. The BLM will decide whether to amend the Tonopah Resource Management Plan to facilitate solar development in the planning area. At the end of this programmatic review, the BLM would not approve or deny any specific proposed rights of way to construct, operate, maintain, and decommission solar generation and storage facilities, but rather further site-specific NEPA analysis for each individual project would be necessary after a record of decision is issued for this programmatic review. Next slide. In the draft EIS, the BLM considered and documented in detailed analysis the potential effects under 3 alternatives. The BLM also reviewed 7 other potential alternatives, but these were dismissed from detailed analysis in this programmatic review because they were either inconsistent with the purpose and need or were technically or economically infeasible. Alternative A, which is the proposed action, would amend the Tonopah Resource Management Plan for visual resource management and slope. It also considers the applications for proposed development of photovoltaic solar facilities, including solar arrays, energy storage, roads, and electric generation intertie lines within the proposed 7 solar rights of way. This alternative assumed 5 years for full build-out of all of the projects and a daily construction workforce of 845 personnel. The table displayed on the screen summarizes the size of each of the proposed solar projects. In total, if all of the projects were fully constructed, the solar generation capacity would be 6.2 gigawatts of power produced from these facilities. Next slide. Alternative B, which is the soils and vegetation conservation alternative and the BLM's preferred alternative, would be the same as the proposed action, but there would be no amendment to the Tonopah Resource Management Plan to change the slope requirement for the planning area from the current maximum of 5% to a maximum of 10%. Development on slopes greater than 5% would be based on additional slope criteria outlined in the 2012 Solar PEIS. Also, the applicants would limit how much area would be fully graded during construction, which removes all vegetation and compacts the soil. Grading would be limited to a maximum of 35% of the proposed development area. Applicants would utilize mowing as needed in the rest of the development area to leave vegetation intact. In mowed areas, vegetation would be mowed to a height of 24 inches, but not less than 18 inches. Under alternative C, which is the no action alternative, the BLM would not amend the Tonopah Resource Management Plan for visual resource management or slope. future development in the planning area could be constrained by the existing visual resource management classifications or slope requirements. Next slide. On the screen is a list of resources and uses that were analyzed in detail in the draft environmental impact statement. These resources were chosen for detailed analysis after considering input received during internal and public scoping periods that occurred last fall. During this programmatic review, the direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts were documented in the EIS for each phase of the proposed projects, which would include construction, operation, maintenance, and decommissioning of solar facilities and energy storage systems within the planning area. The resources with a star next to them are those that also had additional supplemental reports prepared to document potential effects. These supplemental reports are currently available for review on the project's e-planning website. Next slide. Programmatic design features would be applied to protect resources from possible effects associated with the proposed solar developments. A full list of programmatic design features can be found in Appendix B of the Draft Resource Management Plan Amendment and Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement. The list displayed on the screen shows typical environmental protection measures that are outlined in the plans of development for the 7 proposed solar projects. These measures will be further refined during the future site-specific NEPA analysis. Next slide. The NEPA review process for this effort began in November of last year when a notice of intent to prepare a programmatic EIS was published in the Federal Register and the public scoping period occurred. We are currently in the 90-day public review and comment period for the draft EIS and expect to have a final EIS prepared after we review, consider, and respond to any input we receive during this public comment period. A record of decision is anticipated to be prepared by April of next year. To best inform the preparation of the final EIS, please be sure to submit any written comments by October 24th. We will now move into our question and answer session, and Megan Stone with the NEPA consultant team will help facilitate this part of the meeting.
Thank you, Scott. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll just go over some brief guidelines and instructions before we begin. On your screen, you can see a few of our question and answer guidelines. So this evening, we'll be accepting questions through the Q&A feature. To submit a written question, please pull up the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once you get that box open, you may then go ahead and type your question in the Q&A box, and we'll have a specialist from the BLM respond to your question. You may have to toggle your mouse at the bottom of your screen to get the toolbar to pop up where that Q&A box is located. And this evening we'll start with pre-submitted questions before moving on to any new questions. I do want to note that it may take a minute or so to develop the answer to some of these questions, so we do appreciate your patience as we gather that information. I'll note when we've answered all the written questions and are moving on to verbal questions as well. Next slide, please. So on your screen here, you can see some graphics showing you what that Q&A icon looks like and where you can type your question in the Q&A box. We'll be answering all questions verbally today, so stay tuned to hear responses to your questions. And then to ensure accessibility, if anyone would like to ask a question, if you're joining on the phone, you can ask that question verbally. You can do that by pressing *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question, and then we'll go ahead and unmute you and identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. It doesn't look like we have any phone callers today, but just wanted to note that. So I'll let everyone look at this for a moment, and then we'll begin with our pre-registered questions. All right. We have 3 pre-registered questions, so we'll get started with those in a minute. Again, we'll have folks submit those questions to the chat feature. And then if you are joining on the phone, please submit that question verbally. And we'll just take a minute here to get your questions answered. Thank you everyone for your patience. We're working on getting answers to a few of the pre-registered questions, and then we'll go ahead and move it on to any questions coming through the chat feature. Our first pre-registered question is, alternative B defers back to the 2012 solar PEIS and not the current PEIS in development that includes the 10% slope criteria. Will this change with the ROD of the new PEIS? And we'll turn that over to Scott.
Yes, thank you. Very good question. This actually relates just to a matter of timing and when each of these projects was launched. Right now, we are still relying on the 2012 solar PEIS because the 2024 solar PEIS has not been authorized for use. And the BLM's intention with the Esmeralda 7 projects is that once the 2024 solar PEIS is approved, then we will update our Esmeralda 7 EIS to bring in those design criteria and whatnot and make it in conformance with the 2024. But again, since it's not currently approved, we have to utilize what is, which is the 2012. And so it is anticipated that likely by the time we are able to release a final EIS for Esmeralda 7 and get to the record of decision phase, that we will have brought our document into conformance with the 2024 solar PEIS.
Thank you for that response, Scott. And we'll go ahead and move on to our other pre-registered questions. Just take a moment here to get those answers lined up. Thank you everyone for your patience. And a reminder that you can ask a question by pulling up that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Again, you might have to toggle your mouse to get that to appear. And then we'll be allowing verbal questions for anyone joining on the phone. However, I don't see that we have any phone callers. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience. We're just waiting for our questions to come in through the Q&A feature. We've also got a few questions that folks submitted when they registered for this meeting. So we'll be addressing those as well. Thank you all for your patience. All right. Our next question is, are there any reclamation requirements for the solar system removal at the end of the plant's life? And we'll go ahead and turn that over to David.
Yes, so we have a seed mixture requirement after the removal of all structures and materials. The mixture consists primarily of salt brush.
Thank you for that response, David. We'll go ahead and continue to keep an eye out for questions coming in through the Q&A box. And we'll address some of those questions now. Our next question is, will the slope change in alternative B when you conform to the 2024 solar PEIS? And we'll go ahead and turn that over to Scott.
Yes, so thank you for the question. So the Tonopah RMP, as it's currently written, does not allow for photovoltaic solar development on slopes greater than 5%. That RMP is from 1997, and at that time when it was drafted, there were some technological limitations in what you could build or the amount of slope that you could build on. Since then, technology has advanced and there are ways to build on slopes up to 10% and still be protective of soil resources. And so the answer is yes, that assuming that criteria in the 2024 solar PEIS is carried forward in the approved decision, then it may be possible to allow development on up to 10% slopes so long as it's protective of the soil resources. And then the Tonopah RMP would still not need to be amended because the 2024 solar PEIS would have already done that.
Great. Thank you, Scott. We have another question for you here. The next question is, why were these projects not cited in the Miller's SEZ?
Yes, so the 2012 solar PEIS did designate solar energy zones, one of which is Miller's. The reason, though, there's a couple of reasons why these projects aren't cited within Miller's says. One is that there's no substation in the Miller's says area, so there's no way to connect a solar project to a transmission line. And the second reason is that the BLM's obligation is to process applications. We don't develop the applications, we don't develop the proposals, but we are required to analyze the potential environmental effects on the applications we received. And these applications were submitted to us with the locations identified already.
Thank you, Scott. We'll go ahead and give it a moment here and continue to see if we have any more questions coming in through the Q&A feature. Again, if we had anyone new join, we'll be accepting questions and then moving into our public comment session next. For our question and answer session, to submit a question, you'll just use the Q&A feature and type that question in, and then we'll provide a verbal response. So again, we'll give it a moment here and see if anyone else has questions. Someone in the chat did let me know that they had an internet issue, and we've already provided a response to one of their questions. I do just want to note that this meeting is being recorded, and I believe the recording will be posted later. It does take some time to make sure the recording is accessible and has good closed captions, but just keep that in mind in case you missed any responses to your questions or other questions on this meeting. Okay, it looks like we have one question that we'll try and provide an answer for. The question is, what basin is the water for construction and operations coming from? Will there be wells, or will the water be an intercounty transfer? How much water use is anticipated? We'll turn that over to Scott.
Yes, thank you for this question. This would be a great one to submit in writing for us. It is something that we are taking a look at. However, for this programmatic EIS, potential water sources have not yet been identified. And so the confirmed sources of future water, as well as potential parties interested in a water transfer from the locally appropriated basin and outside counties or basin, will be outlined, analyzed, and disclosed in the future site-specific NEPA for each of the projects when a little more information is known.
Thanks, Scott. And since we do have a little bit of time, do you mind providing a response again for the slope question we got? That question was, will the slope change in alternative B when you conform to the 2024 solar PEIS?
Absolutely. So yes, again, the current Tonopah Resource Management Plan that was written back in 1997 only allows photovoltaic panels to be sited on slopes less than 5%. And that was based on the technology that was available at the time for the foundations and platforms and whatnot that the solar panels sit on. Current technology is such that you can site those panels on slopes up to 10%. However, under the alternative B, we are proposing to just bring in the design criteria from the solar PEIS that we're able to use. So right now we're pulling the design criteria from the 2012 solar PEIS. If the 2024 solar PEIS is approved for use, then we will be bringing those design criteria into our Esmeralda 7 NEPA document, which would allow the siting of panels on slopes up to 10% utilizing appropriate technology and design features.
Great, thank you, Scott. With that, we've answered all of the questions that we're able to today. There was one question that we weren't able to address. Any questions not addressed today, we'll respond directly via email. We have information from folks who registered, and we will get back to you promptly. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our public comment session and go to the next slide, please. Perfect. I'll just briefly go through some logistics and instructions real quick before we get started. We're limiting verbal comments to 2 minutes today to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to provide comment. We do want to remind everyone that you can submit any further comments you have through the e-planning webpage or the project email. The information on those options is going to be available in the chat in just a second here, and we'll be reviewing those after this comment session as well. We do ask that we all be respectful of others and their viewpoints and refrain from using profanity. While passion is welcome in your comment, policy requires that we mute anyone who uses inappropriate language because we are recording this meeting and others may be live streaming. So please avoid inappropriate language. If that does happen, we'll provide a reminder before unmuting the person to try again using words acceptable for all ages. Next slide, please. To offer a comment today, please go ahead and access the raise hand feature, which will indicate to us that you are prepared to offer a comment. I'll then call on folks in the order of hands raised. When you hear your name call out, please be prepared to unmute yourself and provide your comment. You can access the raise hand feature by clicking on either the reactions icon or the participants list icon, which are both located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you wave your mouse back and forth across the bottom of your Zoom screen, those icons should appear. You may need to exit out of your full screen view in Zoom to see those icons. You can then select the raise hand feature. Again, that's located either in the reactions icon or at the bottom of your participants list. Once you've raised your hand, you'll then be unmuted so that you can provide your verbal public comment. You may be double muted. If that's the case, I'll prompt you to unmute yourself on your end so that we can hear you. And we ask that you please spell out your first and last name for the record before providing your verbal public comment. And if you are representing an organization or group, please say so during your comment. After you have provided your comment, we will mute you and move on to our next commenter. On the screen, I have included some graphics showing participants where they can access that raise hand feature, and that's on the left bottom of the screen there. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into our comment session. And I don't see that we have any phone callers, but if any phone callers join, we'll provide instructions on how to unmute yourself on your phone keypad. We did have one person indicate that they might like to provide a comment when they registered for today's meeting. So I'll go ahead and call on them and see if they'd still like to provide a comment. Christine Fisher, please raise your hand if you would still like to provide a comment. And if not, we'll go ahead and just open it up to the whole meeting, regardless if you registered or not to provide a comment. We do have about 15 minutes left in our meeting. So we'll continue to stay on the meeting until that time to accept any public comments that folks might have. Again, if you'd like to submit a comment, please raise your hand. We'll go ahead and unmute you and you can provide your verbal comment and we'll get that incorporated in the project record and analyzed. If you would prefer to provide written comments, we have information in the chat about where you can send those comments to. You can submit them in a few different ways, like has been mentioned earlier in this presentation. You can submit through the NEPA Register e-planning website by email, or you can submit by hard copy. So again, those links, the email address and the mailing address are provided in the Zoom chat if folks would rather submit those in writing. Looks like we do have a hand raised. I'll go ahead and unmute you now. Hi, Nancy. You should be able to unmute.
Hello?
Hi, we can
Okay.
hear you.
All right. This is
Could
Nancy
you spell?
Boland,
Oh, perfect.
NANCYBOLAND.
Thanks, Nancy. You can begin your comment.
Well, I work as a consultant for Esmeralda County on this project. I just want to say earlier on, Scott Distel said there was no substation near the Miller's Says, and there is a substation there called Miller's that NV Energy owns. And if I could, I'd just like to make a quick comment, is that it seems to me this whole exercise is making the land fit the project rather than vice versa, like you should be doing in good land planning. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Nancy. We'll go ahead and place you back on mute. And we will keep an eye out for any other hands raised. All right, we have about 10 minutes left in our meeting this evening. A reminder that will be on until the end of the scheduled end time to listen to any comments that you might have. If you'd like to provide a verbal comment, please do use that raise hand feature. We'll go ahead and get you unmuted and you can provide your comments. Again, if you'd rather submit those in writing, you can submit them electronically on e-planning or by email. And then you can also submit them hard copy to the BLM Battle Mountain District Office. And we've provided that information in the chat. All right, everyone, we do have just a little bit of time here before we'll go ahead and move into closing remarks. So if you would like to provide a verbal comment, please go ahead and access the raise hand feature and we'll go ahead and get you unmuted. We probably have time for one or two more comments. If not, we'll go ahead and move to closing remarks. I'll continue to keep an eye out and see if anyone raises their hand. Thank you all for joining. All right. It doesn't look like we have any hands raised. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and turn it over to Scott for closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining and participating in today's meeting. The draft EIS and other information about the project are available for review on the project's e-planning website. Please be sure to submit any written comments by October 24th. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Please have a good rest of your day. And thank you again for participating.